Hello guys, and welcome to my channel. In this video I'll be showing you how I made this two-piece toddler skirt set, so if you're interested in how I achieved this look, please stay tuned. Alright, let's get started. I have 1 yard of this cotton knit fabric with a little stretch and these decorative colored circles. I have a toddler tee that I fold in half to the front, then trace around. I indicate the armhole and the neckline by poking through along the seam with my seam ripper. I fold it in half to the back and do the same. I lay the sleeve flat and add 2 inches to the bottom as I trace around. Again, I use my seam ripper to indicate the top of the sleeve. Here are the front and back patterns that I've cropped, measuring 10 inches down from the front of the neckline. And here's the pattern for the sleeve that I've added 2 inches to the bottom along with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I made the pattern for the front waistband by taking my baby girl's waist measurement, divided that by 2, and added a 1/2 inch seam allowance on both sides for the length. I made the width 2 inches, seam allowance included. I'll show you how I measure the back waistband later. I take the back of the shirt and pin at the center point. I have a placket for the back opening, that's 4 by 2 inches that I've pre-cut and overlock stitched around the raw ends. I place it front facing down at the center point and pin together. I also pin about 1 inch above the bottom of the placket. I sew down one side of the center point and stop at the end of the pin. After sewing that side down, I carefully cut above that seam down the center, 1 inch above the bottom of the placket. Now I have one side open and one side sewn together. I took some fabric and made a strap for the button loop. I'll attach the link to the tutorial that goes into detail on how I made it. I fold the strap and cut off about 1 inch. I line the end of the button loop at the raw end of the open side of the placket, a 1/2 inch under the neckline, and pin. Then I sew down along the open end and over a couple stitches to close the placket. After sealing the ends of the placket, I flip it under to the back. Then I sew a top stitch along the end of the opening. Here's a closer look after that's finished. I line the back and front of the shirt, front facing in, and pin the shoulders together. Then I sew across with a straight stitch. After sewing the shoulder together, I open up the armhole. I line the center point of the sleeve and the shoulder seams together and pin. Then I continue pinning down both sides. I sew across with a straight stitch. Here's the attached sleeve. Next, I pin the underarm seams together and sew down the side from the end of the sleeve to the bottom of the shirt. After sewing the sides together, I went ahead and hemmed the sleeves, the neckline, and the bottom of the shirt. Here's the back of the shirt and the button loop at the opening. I'll add the button a little later. Here I have the pieces for the front and the back of the skirt. For the waistline at the top of the skirt, I took the measurement of my baby girl's waistline, divided that by 2, then added 5 inches for the length, along with the 1/2 inch seam allowance on both sides. I measured the skirt at 10 inches long, from her waistline down to her knees. Working with one side at a time, I take the pocket pieces that I've pre-cut, and I'll add the link to the pocket tutorial that goes into detail on how to make them. I take 2 of the pocket pieces and measure 1 inch down at the top of the right and left corner, then pin at those points. I place the pockets right sides facing down and pin at those 2 points on both sides. Then I sew down with the straight stitch. Next, I line both sides of the skirt front facing in and pin the pockets and the sides together. Then I sew down around the pockets and down to the bottom of the skirt with the straight stitch. Here's the skirt sewn together down the sides. I hem the bottom of the skirt as well. I have the front waistband that I've cut out using my pattern. I make sure to cut the long side on the fold that will double the width for the fold over. I make the back of the waistline the same length as the top of the skirt, along with the 1/2 inch seam allowance on both sides. I also cut it on a fold with the same width measurement as the front waistband. I line both ends of the waistbands front facing in and pin together. Then sew down with the straight stitch. I also sew a base stitch along the top of the front of the skirt for gathering and leave the back as it is. I use the length of the front of the waistband to measure the length for gathering at the front of the skirt. When the seam of the skirt and waistband lined up together, I pull the skirt through the waistband and pin the seams together, front facing in. I continue pinning across the waistline all the way around. Then I sew around with the straight stitch. Here's a closer look after the waistband has been attached. Moving on to the back of the waistband, I make sure the seam allowance is facing upwards. Then I take the top end of the waistband, fold in a 1/2 inch, then fold over right underneath the seam and pin together on the other side. I continue to fold over and pin along the back of the waistband only. After pinning, I sew directly on top of the seam, which is also referred to as stitching in the ditch. I also make sure to sew a 1/2 inch past the side seams on both sides. Here's a closer look after that's finished. I cut some elastic that is the measurement of the front waistband minus 2 inches with a 1/2 inch seam allowance on both ends. I attach a safety pin at one end of the elastic. I pull it through an opening at the back waistband. I push and pull through and make sure to leave a 1/2 inch of the elastic above the side seam and pin together to hold in place with the safety pin. I continue to push and pull the elastic through to the other side of the opening. Again, I pin the elastic a 1/2 inch past the side seam to hold in place. I sew directly on top of the side seams on both sides to sew the elastic in place. Here's the back of the waistband with the elastic in place. Now I'm going to take the end of the front waistband, fold it a 1/2 inch at the top, and fold over underneath the seam and pin on the other side. I'm basically using the same method as I did to close the back of the waistband. I continue pinning across, and again I sew directly on top of the seam with a straight stitch. Here's the front waistband after it's finished, and the back with the pockets in place. Here's the shirt and the skirt together. I went ahead and sewed the button on for the button loop attachment. And now the set is complete.
Thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.